Hello, you are listening to the Field Coach Experts podcast, where we share the secrets of franchisee support that are unlocking hidden profitability in progressive brands across North America. I'm here today with Jen Brannon. How are you, Jen?
I am great. Thanks, Ange. How are you?
I'm good. I always love these opportunities for us to talk shop because we're both out there doing our thing for AC Inc. and you're having lots of great calls with people who are looking to work with us and learn more. And I get to hear from people at conferences and roundtables and through the team. But now you and I just get to talk about it all. So that's going to be fun. All
Sure.
right. So today we're going to talk, as I said, we're going to talk shop about helping franchisees make smarter business decisions based on their metrics rather than just kind of based on gut. And really the role that the franchisor and franchisor team has in supporting franchisees with financials. Sound like fun, Jen? I just feel like this is just totally up your alley.
Yeah, I feel like we focus a lot on this topic and supporting franchisors with knowing how to really bring in financials and then coaching to financials because it's really, really important because as a former franchisee, the money in my pocket was, number one. So we need to know how we can increase that profitability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that franchisors really get tripped up on because we'll get into it in a minute. I'm going to leave that hanging and first give a shout out to our sponsor for this podcast. So this episode is sponsored by T-Source, the technology partner built specifically for franchisors who are ready to scale smarter. As franchise brands grow, technology, we all know, can become a real bottleneck. Disconnected systems, everything's all over, no clear ownership, and costs quietly creeping up in the background. T-Source cuts through that with a clear roadmap and then actually stays in the trenches to implement, manage, and evolve those systems alongside your team. Brands working with T-Source have streamlined their operations, reduced technology costs, and built the infrastructure they need to scale with confidence. It's really that combination of strategy, execution, and accountability that sets them apart. So be sure to check out T-Source. And Jen, we're going to get back into metrics. I mean, this ties in with what T-Source does too, helping franchisors bring that all together. So let's start with this. Why do you think franchisors struggle so much with getting franchisees to care about their metrics? Like, what's going on with all of that?
Well, if we focus kind of on the financial metrics, I think it's because a lot of times franchisees are afraid of financials. They tend to look at things like the revenue, of course. We all want to look at that. How many sales are we making and so on. But a lot of times we have to remember, a lot of times they've never owned their own business. And so P&Ls and, balance sheets and some of the, cash flow and some of those things, a lot of franchisees are afraid of them. They don't understand them. And they kind of feel like that those are things for the accountant or the bookkeeper. And so they're not really looking at them because they have those views. And then from a franchisor standpoint, I think that a lot of times that is something that's overlooked. The franchisor is assuming or hoping that the franchisee will embrace their financials. And so there's a lot of that. They're not doing it, but yet franchisor, we know they should be doing it, and we're crossing our fingers and hoping that they're going to be doing it. And maybe we, from a franchisor standpoint, aren't maybe doing what we need to do to empower franchisees to be in that place to use their financials.
I wonder if it's kind of that whole passing the buck thing. Like, we say, the franchisees will say, well, my bookkeeper does that, or my accountant does that, and they'll tell me if there's a problem, right? Maybe then the franchisor often maybe just thinks, well, they've got a bookkeeper, they've got an accountant, and they're business owners, and they, just assuming, like you're saying, that they're going to care about it and do something with it. And another thing you mentioned is, we definitely know that there's fear around what the numbers mean. The franchisee's automatically going to, just kind of shy away from it. And I didn't make this line up, but many people have heard me say, a confused mind often says no, right? So when you're so busy as a franchisee, and someone's like, here, look at the spreadsheet of, your profit and loss statement, or let's review your balance sheet. It's like, I got a customer over there to deal with, or a staff member and they're not bought in because they don't understand it, right?
They don't understand it. A lot of times they don't understand the why behind why they should be looking at
Yeah.
this and what is it
Yeah.
going to do for them. And
Yeah.
it's they'd much rather be dealing with the customer, or in their office doing other things or whatever it might be, than looking at numbers. Numbers is quite often something people don't just avoid and don't want to look at
Yeah.
them.
Except for the ones that obsess about the numbers, and then it's almost
Yes.
too much, right?
Yeah.
There's also, I'm the
Yeah.
only one that's listening to seeing that too, but it's sometimes like, get out of your office and go out into the community and be a business owner, and stop just obsessing over the numbers. But yes, it's sometimes it's all or nothing, right?
Yeah.
Let's let's get into this for a minute, because I think people, we often see people say, we think the problem is that we don't, um, maybe our field coaches or our FBCs don't have enough, financial acumen, and maybe we should get them more trained. And if they are more credible and more trained, that will solve things. Um, we get calls from franchisors that are like, how do we fix this? You guys are coaches, or we
Mhm.
coach the coaches, and they're like, how do we fix this? And we think it's we just need to give them more training. We're not saying they don't need that, but what have you seen with those? We've had people come in for that, and then they end up having us help them with what really needed to happen. What are you seeing in those calls, the mindset changes and things? Like,
Well, I think
I think you know where
Yeah,
I'm going
I,
maybe
I
with
think
this.
you're 100% right. Is a lot of coaches don't have the financial acumen themselves and don't know how to coach to financials. But I think we need to back it up a little bit, because there's a big step that needs to happen in order to, from a franchisor standpoint, in order to position those coaches to be able to actually coach financials. If we are not doing what we need to do to get the knowledge for our franchisees or into our franchisees about the how, what is a P&L, how do you read it, how do you use it, how do you analyze it to make business decisions, what things mean. And I'm sure we've said this on the podcast before, however many, like so many franchisees we've come across that says, like, what does a P&L mean, what is that, they don't even know.
P&L,
And yeah, right.
right?
And
The acronym
franchisors,
P&L.
again, they're focused so much on making good operators. How do you make the smoothie, as opposed to equally figuring out how do we teach these business skills to our franchisees? And there's going to be lots of franchisors out there that are thinking, that's not my job. We're here to teach them, and I keep saying how to make the smoothie, but that's my example of a system, of a brand. And I would challenge them to think about, okay, it might not be your job, but how is that working out for you? Are your franchisees taking the initiative they need to get themselves that training? Are they open to coaching on the financials when they don't even understand them? Or could we make some simple, well, I say simple, nothing simple, but could we make some changes in the way we are either doing pre-training or maybe within launch period. I'm not suggesting that we're going to dig into financials during that operational classroom training when they come to you or anything. We've still got to teach them how to make the smoothie. But how can we get them this knowledge? And there's with, different LMS and so many online courses and things, it can be really easy to implement and teach and then do, business boot camps or workshops or things like that. So I think if I'm going to pinpoint what a franchisor should do, and where we see a lot of those gaps, first and foremost, is that training piece, offering that and incorporating that into somewhere in your beginning stages of a franchisee life cycle.
Well, what I'm
Right?
hearing
So,
even in that as well is accepting or deciding to offer that kind of coaching and training to franchisees. Like you
mhm.
have the franchisors making that decision that we are going to offer that is the first step. Because as you said, a lot of them just don't think of it, or sometimes franchisors kind of have this feeling, well, they should go figure that out on their own. But what we've seen is, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, the progressive brands are progressive franchisors that want to be ahead of the competition and be successful and see franchisees be successful, are figuring out some of these secrets. So one of them being, let's actually focus on this with franchisees.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And then two really kind of basic things, well, I say basic things, but a lot of brands aren't doing it, is if you're going to be training on financials, and then we're going to talk in a second about coaching to financials, we have to have the infrastructure in place to be able to do that. And what I mean by that is we have to have a standard chart of accounts that every franchisee is mandated to use, and then we have to be collecting P&Ls, or we have to have access, whether you're using Profit Keeper, any of those software where you're getting eyes on their financials. We have to have that information, because if we don't have that, how can we coach to profitability? Right? And if we can't coach to profitability, we're keeping ourselves in this vicious circle of our franchisees thinking all of our coaching is designed to increase their sales so that we as franchisors can make more revenue or make more royalty, excuse me. Whereas our coaching should be focused, yes, on increasing sales, but with the ultimate goal of, greater profitability for the franchisee, more money in our pocket, really. So
okay, I got
those
I'm
would be two things.
I made a couple notes. I want to come back in a minute to training versus coaching. Um, because I'm hearing you're saying that. I just think people might be not catching that, like being that we want to be clear on the difference. But you said some things that are critical, like you said, profit and loss, or P&L collection, and then access, and then the standardized chart of accounts. So what would you say to somebody that's sitting here right now and has, because we do see this, 175 franchisees, and they don't have or 400 we've even seen, and they don't have
Yeah.
either one of. Let's start with profit and loss collection. That's a more common one, I think, as brands, even
Yeah.
in more established brands. So if they're not collecting P&Ls, and we can sit here and tell them all day long, just like we teach, it's not going to necessarily make it happen. How can they start to get those P&Ls from franchisees? What needs
First,
to happen in their
yeah,
system?
first thing, as soon as it's renewal time and you're redoing agreements, you get that in, that you mandate it. You create your process for whatever that's going to look like, that how they are going to be submitting them, or again, I keep saying Profit Keeper, but there's other ones that are out there. Organize your workflow around that. And if it's going to mean they've got to submit them, somebody following up, because if we're not, accountability, if we're not following up, people are not going to do it. So that's for new guys, because that's kind of the easier way,
Yeah, but how do we
right?
create buy-in with the franchisees that are not submitting? Is what I'm getting
Well,
at. Like,
Yeah, that's if we create it first for those new guys, we've got the process in place. The harder element is the people that have never done it before, and that turnaround. And your word is exactly right with that group. We've got to figure out in it, the size, all these factors matter. I'm keeping it very simple, but we have to get buy-in on why they want to do this. Why is it important? What is it going to do for them? Because franchisees, quite often, and I know people out there listening are probably going to be nodding your head. And as a former franchisee, a lot of times we might think that there's some ill intent there. You only want to see my P&Ls because you want to check up on me. You're kind of big brother. I don't want you to. This is my business. I want to see my P&Ls. I don't want your eyes on my P&Ls. Where I spend my money is my business. And that's right to a certain extent. But so we need the messaging, however you're going to do this, around the why. It's not about that. We don't care from a business standpoint if you write off your car, and as long as your bookkeepers and accountant says that's okay, who are we? It doesn't matter. It's about us being able to help you with the profitability and to help you understand where maybe you might be losing money because you're overpaying in merchant fees, and we can help get those down. Or your labor percentage is way higher than what the benchmark. There's all kinds of different things there that the P&Ls are going to help the coach identify. And if it's about more money in your pocket, then franchisees are much more apt to be bought in. Not everyone. We're going to have to understand that when we're trying to change management, it's not about getting 100% as much as we would love to. It's starting with those people that will give you the buy-in. And then
them as a role model sometimes, right? For the other
exactly
people. Like when I started handing in my profit and loss statements and reviewing them with my FBC, and now I'm saving $500 a week or a month, or that's why it's been a good thing to do. So I think So to summarize, it's all about if you haven't been, because people that might, if they're listening and they're like, we're really struggling with profit and loss collection, the collection of document or numbers, then none of this matters what we're about to say. So I wanted to make sure we touch on that it's helping the franchisee see why it matters, and that can be because we can help you reduce costs. It's because we care about the profitability of your business. We might catch something that you wouldn't have caught because we get to see the aggregate data, assuming we're getting enough of it. If the more we get from, and we can also we can be using it to help everybody here. So and then as far as the chart of accounts, it's kind of the same. It's again, right? Like it's just about creating buy-in about why we need to make this shift and get everybody on the same chart of accounts. So I just want to make sure we touched on that. So going back to assuming, okay, franchisor has accepted, yes, makes sense. I should be incorporating all of this. I should have a process for profit and loss collection. I should have the standardized chart of accounts. I should teach franchisees how to do or how to understand their P&Ls. Let's just touch on quickly that training versus coaching. Do you want to clarify the difference between the two?
Training is really teaching about the financials. And I always encourage brands to not leave this up to your coach to train individuals. So whether you're going to train and teach and go through the process of what things are, how they work, how you analyze all of that kind of stuff, that can be done in an LMS system. It can be done I've talked about like business boot camps or a financial training boot camp in groups. I love to see that because the collective learning and the peer-to-peer support to learn these things, people feel like they're not alone, because a lot of franchisees think they are. They think, I'm the only one that doesn't get this. I'm so dumb. I don't know anything about financials. I'm scared of financials. And that's just not the case. And so when they can see, other people are in.
Yeah, more people are usually in that camp.
Yeah, right. So do some kind of training to give the basic knowledge of the financials and what they are and how to use them. And then a coach is actually looking at the individual numbers with the franchisee, and looking at it as far as maybe they're doing some goal setting. And then the coaching is about, okay, we want to get from a 48% labor percentage of revenue to a 40%. How are we going to do that? What is that going to look like? And it's really, yes, it is a financial metric, but it's really the action that they're going to take to do that. And now we're building some action steps and some goals around that kind of thing. It may not even be coaching, so to speak, as look, your merchant fees are 4.5. Who are you using? What's their percentage? I know that these other franchisees are using this company. You maybe could get yourself down to 3%, right? It's spotting those things as well. But I think the coaching, the advertising, that's another one we see. So many franchisees don't spend enough in advertising. Keeping an eye on that, and then we can coach to why we need a higher spend. And then again, what is that going to look like? How are we going to get results? And then drawing a direct line between the fact that we're not spending enough and your leads are down, or your leads aren't at benchmark, or whatever that direct line looks like, and make the case and really be able to coach, not by telling, not by talking at your franchisee, but using, the effective questioning that we teach coaches, so that they understand it and they come to their own conclusions, and they kind of get it. So I think that's kind of the key differences there.
Yeah, because hopefully this isn't people's first time listening to us, but if it is, we talk all the time about the difference between coaching and consulting, and the negative side of just trying to tell people what to do. If if a franchisee's already uncomfortable with the idea of numbers because they get overwhelmed, or they're embarrassed, or they're protective about it, then coming in and just telling them what to do. It's more like what you're describing is being like a partner for them. How I want to help you. Let's talk about your goals and like where things are at, and all in pursuit of you getting more out of this business. That's when you can generally get their attention a bit more.
Mhm.
So, and I had another question roll in my mind, but I'll just pause and see if you have anything before I jump there.
No, I guess the other thing, and maybe you're thinking the same thing, is moving over to the coaches,
Yeah,
because
direct
that's a
coaching.
big. Is that right? The
That's where
coaches
I was
who,
next going to go. I just didn't want to leave anything hanging if there
okay.
was anything you wanted to say. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I
that's
don't. I
something.
don't. Yeah.
Yeah, well, just where I was going to go is, we see in whether it's in our certification program, at our roundtables, or with clients that we're helping implement the strategic growth coaching framework for, we see this a lot where coaches are uncomfortable and they avoid the conversations. And so, like, why do the coaches, let's just name it, why do the coaches avoid these conversations? Why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they working with the franchisees with financials more?
Well, assuming that they have access to the financials,
Yeah.
it's because the coaches sometimes feel exactly like some franchisees do, that they're not strong at financials, right?
Yeah.
There a lot of times those people that are in that coaching role have come because either they have been um, an industry expert, or they've been a former franchisee, or maybe they've come from marketing because they've got a nice personality and an interest in coaching franchisees, but have never had any formal financial training, and therefore they want to focus, a lot of the time they want to focus on the operation side of the business, because again, we talk about this, at nauseum, about how we coaching, the mistake that coaching is making good operators, and that's really not what coaching truly needs to be. So those coaches are avoiding them because they're not comfortable with them, they don't know the how.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the other side of it, where the coaches that are very comfortable with them, sometimes too comfortable, and all they coach to, or consults with, if you will, consulting being problem solving, telling, talking at your franchisee, is the financials, and everything's about the performance on the financials. And so you get a lot of the times those two sides of the spectrum. Um, and then the other thing is a lot of brands don't have a proper coaching framework. So there's no set, like, when do we talk to financials and how do we use financials in our coaching program? What does that look like? And we hear all of the time brands that have, whether it's 2 coaches to 20 coaches, everybody's doing it their own way, a different way. Some are using financials, some are not. Some look at them every session, some look at them every month, some look at them every, a quarter or once a year. And there's no consistency there, right? And so I think that is what we see, that with our field coach training, with our work that we do with franchisors, of implementing that proper coaching program, or sorry, framework, the coaching framework, where we show you how to effectively use financials and coach to it, and then getting the training for the coaches on how do you coach financials. What does that look like? What is the best practice around that, so that all of your coaches can be consistently doing the same thing?
Does that, so can we get a specific of what good financial coaching actually looks like? Like, I guess that's hitting on it there. The framework, having a framework, um, using the numbers towards the actions. I'm hearing you say that, um, whether labor percentage is a good one, like you said, or advertising, and like, so what actions do we need to take to
Yes.
get these in line, and why? There's a lot of, helping franchisees understand why. I guess, are we missing anything in terms of what good financial coaching actually looks like in a system? Is there anything we're missing?
No, I would just say, as part of a process, best practice is that, not to go over it all, right? Like, assuming our franchisees have been trained and trained on the financials, they're bought into the process. Before your monthly, if you're doing a monthly coaching session, we ideally, the franchisees already looked at their financials, their P&L. Let's even just say clearly just the P&L, whether, some brands' balance sheet really comes in and some others. But your coach is looking at the P&Ls, so that we're all aware and we're looking for those red flags. P&Ls quite often are not complicated, and people are so fearful of them. There's so many fixed costs a lot of the time, that there's usually only some of the key things that we need to be highlighting and watching. And I think understanding those and then making goals around those. We often have revenue goals, but goals should be also get my labor percentage down,
Yeah.
get my advertising spend to be
Yeah.
this, reduce costs over, like, whatever it might be. So I think that's key. And then every quarter, we should, at our quarterly meeting that we're doing with franchisees, we should be doing a deeper dive from the quarter, and then potentially, depending on the franchisee, comparing it to the previous quarter, maybe comparing it to the quarter last year, the same quarter last year, whatever's right for your system. Doing a deeper dive every quarter, and certainly at the end of every year. And
Well, and
so having a process for what does that quarterly or annual review look like as
I
well.
mean, yeah, it all comes back to also having, like, for if anybody's listening and they're using our strategic growth coaching framework, they know what we're talking about already,
Yeah.
because it starts with the 10-year goal, or the, not maybe 10-year, but the bigger goal, and drilling that down, and then into the year and into the quarter and into the immediate action steps. Um, I want to point something out for anybody that's listening. If you're in a leadership position, running a field team, a team of FBCs, or you happen to be an FBC yourself and you're listening, this could apply directly. But you said something really important here, and it probably seems obvious, but just going to say it anyway. That if when it comes to the profit and loss statement, make sure your FBCs know even just the two main levers, and we've said it a few times, it's usually advertising, like marketing or advertising costs, and labor. In most businesses, those are the yeah, there might be some exceptions or whatever, but those are the most controllable costs that drive profitability. Like if we're not spending enough on advertising, that obviously makes an impact on lead gen and all of that. And then if we're overspending on labor, we're just wasting money. And that there's more to it than that. Why, if someone's overspending on labor, just going in and telling them you're overspending on labor, that's not coaching. It's how can we help them get their labor in place? Let's work together to create that plan. But my main point here is if I think that we see coaches getting this insecurity and they feel like they don't have any credibility because they don't fully understand the financials. What we teach is you don't have to be a financial wizard. It's great if you are, the more you'll have more natural confidence. But if you understand and you can say to a franchisee that what I'm most concerned with right now is these two levers, whichever you're check what they are for, make sure your FBCs know what those are for your business. But if they can go in there and say like, hey, let's look at your profit. Oh my gosh, you're at 11%. This should be actually down to 8%, or this should be up to 14%. And they have the confidence to know those two metrics. I just think it's a game changer for people, and I think that even like the coaches are not always clear on that. So I think that's like an important takeaway is go make sure your team that is out there with the franchisees know the most critical levers and what they should be.
Yeah, and I think there's one more thing for brands, and I see some brands like this that a lot of their coaches are better at the financials, but brands that have heavy cogs, because that's another big thing, right? A lot of retail where you have maybe a lot of inventory management,
Yeah.
sometimes restaurants and things, right? Like the price, keeping your inventory in control, the pricing of things. Those coaches
Gross margins is
do
big.
get, yeah,
Yeah.
all of that. They get
Yeah.
more, like financials have a bigger place a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times with certain industries
Yeah.
than maybe a service-based industry that has no cogs or not many, right? And
Or
there's
not
some
controllable.
yeah, and then there's others that like they're holding a lot of equipment and things on their balance sheets. So you need to make sure your coaches have the appropriate amount of training,
Based
especially
on the
for
business.
brands like that on those
Yeah.
two types of things and any other I've missed, because if they're not, and I've seen it too many times, they're not equipped to be coaching to the financials, and that the franchisee's profitability and sometimes even success can be at jeopardy because they're not balancing things
Well,
properly, or
and
I
yeah,
think.
you could do more damage than good if you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
If a coach is, yeah, I think I just wanted to say my point there is that I think sometimes the coaches overthink some things that they should be talking about when there's certain things that are the most important. So if it maybe it is includes cogs or like, but whatever it is, like just for them, make sure your coach is at least starting there. That they can start there, and that they are, again, if they're a really good coach, if they have the coaching skills, then they will have the confidence to say, you know what, I actually, if a franchisee asks them a question and they don't know the answer, that's if they're coached properly and they've got the skills, they can say, I actually don't know the answer to that, or I think I know the answer, but I just want to verify it. They come back to you, and then they
mhm.
have time to go get help with that right in the background. So I guess I'm trying to say that it is great if a coach has the training, coaching capability, all of that, like the financial capability. But if they don't, you still have an opportunity there to just simplify some of these things for them. Would you agree?
Yep, yeah,
Oh,
yep.
okay.
For sure. I think
Oh,
what's
okay.
aligned with that also, and this is maybe another tip that I have for brands and more established brands. I'm sure would have this, but if there's any emergings out there, is that when it comes to the financials, just like our metric KPIs, like leads or conversion rates or things but from a financial standpoint, we need to make sure that we have our benchmarks for these coaches and
Yeah,
franchisees,
that's what I
right?
was
So,
getting at too.
right. So what is our labor percentage that is the optimum that we want to be striving for? How much should we be spending in advertising? Whatever else, the whole cog breakdown, like what should that look like? We have to have that all figured out, so that your coach then can coach to that. And if we
Yeah.
don't, that's easy work that any financial person can put together, an accountant or a bookkeeper, whoever can put together to figure out what those should be in an ideal situation.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, well, I think we've covered quite a bit. Are we missing anything else that you really wanted to touch
We
on?
have.
I think we have.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
think
I think we've touched on the confidence piece, coaches having the confidence and a lot of the steps along the way,
yeah.
you were going to say?
I think just so much of this, if we had to in a nutshell, is creating the proper infrastructure, having the pieces in place, giving everybody the training they need to understand financials, both the franchisees and the coaches, and then the training for those coaches, of how to actually coach financials effectively. I think that really those are the three big, key takeaways from this podcast that we touched on.
There we go. Hopefully, people wrote those down. Is there one, like we always say, the Go Be Awesome challenge? Like if somebody wants to go out right now and go in this next, say, week, do one thing that if they can't, change the whole system or whatever, what's something they could do differently if they're listening to this and especially if they lead a team of FBCs? I've got one
I
if you want. Or
think,
you
I
already
mean,
want it, you got it.
there's not one size fits all because there's so many different scenarios. But if they lead a team of FBCs, if you've not thought about this before, or you're like, I think everybody's doing things differently, I would take the time to figure out what is everybody doing, to understand
Right.
how each of your FBCs is approaching financials. What does that look like? What is their comfort level with coaching financials? And then if you've come to some realizations of, some things need to change, put together a game plan of
Yeah, that's
how
good.
to make that change.
It goes back to what we always say, and not a expression I made up, but say all the time. If you can name it, you can tame it. Like you got to know where you're starting from. Go find out what they're doing. Find out, maybe do a survey of your coaches, like on a scale of 1 to 5. How confident are you in these situations? And yeah, get a baseline so that you know what you're working with. That's really good. I think that's something people could go do.
And watch the coaching calls. Don't just take what your people say. Watch your people in action
Yeah,
so that
yeah,
you can see
exactly.
firsthand experience, or yeah, you can have the firsthand experience.
Yeah, don't just guess. And that applies to all of
Yeah.
the ways to help coaches be better, not just in financials. Okay, well,
Yeah.
don't forget, everybody, to go check out T-Source. They're at tsourceit.com. Jen, it's been awesome. As always, we hope that everybody left here with some actionable takeaways. That's always the goal, helping franchisors modernize their field coaching, unlock that hidden profitability that's sitting right inside your brand. If anybody's listening to this and you had a little mindset shift, we'd love to hear it, or pass this along to someone else. Yeah, and if you're curious about how this can look in the system, reach out, because Jen, you want to give your email address?
Sure. Jennifer at fieldcoachexperts.com. I do the majority of the,
Discovery
discovery
calls.
calls or exploration calls, whatever we want to have. So I'd love to meet everyone and just talk about what's going on in your system and, understand your identified gaps. And then we can talk about potentially how EC can help.
Yeah, or if we've got other people to recommend to you, whatever, wherever you look like you need the help, we're there. We're there to chat. Okay, well, until until next time, everyone, go be awesome.